2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Conrad Smith with AIM Transportation Solutions, and as promised, I'm joined by AIM Regional Safety Manager John Rugarber, who will be leading today's session, focused on the revamped compliance categories as outlined in the CSA prioritization preview, as well as a high-level look at some of the other major issues the industry will continue to wrestle with this year. And at its most basic, the FMCSA's updates to CSA, or Compliance Safety Accountability, will impact how fleets are assessed and prioritized for intervention, which could lead to higher inspection frequency, costly fines, and even inhibit the ability to transport altogether. And ultimately, these changes are a bit of a double-edged sword. They could mean greater scrutiny for some fleets while offering others a better avenue to improve their scores. And with the CSA prioritization preview, we've been able to get a good hard look at how this system is going to change, especially when it comes to those ever so important compliance categories. So John is going to take us through those revamped categories, and he's also going to touch on some additional topics like truck parking, the crash preventability determination program, lawsuit abuse, and a handful of other hot button industry issues. Now, with the CSA prioritization changes, complying is going to be of the utmost importance. Stricter safety prioritization and updated scoring methods really mean that fleets need to be proactive in maintaining their equipment and staying ahead of inspections. At the same time, the environment we operate in, and I know I don't need to tell anybody on this call that, but we're all dealing with increases in operational costs and several regulatory and industry issues, making compliance, efficiency, and reliability absolutely critical to success. One way AIM can help is by not only being an informational resource, but by being a full service truck leasing provider. Our leasing programs ensure you're running new, reliable, and fuel-efficient equipment, all professionally and routinely maintained throughout the life of the vehicle. So that means when your truck leaves an AIM shop, they're road ready, inspection ready, and ready to keep your customers happy and your CSA scores in check. Beyond leasing, we offer several other services designed to add value and relief to your business, including commercial truck rentals, dedicated contract carriage. We are number 26 on Transport Topics top 50 list of dedicated carriers. We also offer used truck sales, freight brokerage, and a full menu of maintenance programs, everything from preventative maintenance all the way up to a top to bottom professional shop management solution. And what really sets us apart is our customer first approach. I know a lot of companies say that, but as the largest privately held truck leasing company in America, AIM really combines the resources and capabilities of a large corporation with the personalized service and flexibility you'd expect from a family-owned and award-winning company like ours. And speaking of which, last year we did earn CCJ's Innovator of the Year award for our road rescue tool on our smartphone app, which all of our customers' drivers have access to. And then we were also named a top 100 most loved workplace by Newsweek magazine for the second year in a row. And all that was alongside several other awards and distinctions. So if you'd like to learn more about how AIM can help you navigate the CSA changes and industry challenges, or if you'd simply like to focus more on your core business and leave all these headaches to us, please feel free to reach out to me after today's session. Everyone here should have my email address from the webinar invite, and I'd be more than happy to help. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the topics of the hour. I will ask that everyone just please hang on to any questions until after the presentation, just so we can be respectful of everyone's time and keep things flowing. After John is done presenting, I'll open the floor up for questions. So John, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and tag you in.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, Conrad, again for that fine introduction that you always do. I want to welcome everyone. Good afternoon to the majority of you. If there's anybody on the West Coast, it's 11 o'clock over there. So they're about halfway through done their day. My name is John Rugarber, as Conrad mentioned. I'm a regional safety manager with AIM Transportation Solutions. Been with AIM for about 23 years. worked my way up from being a driver to now I'm a regional safety manager, and I do quite a number of other different things for us remotely. So, Conrad, at the end of the year last year, we put our heads together and we thought that it would be a good idea to come up with a year-end update to kind of bring people up to speed with what's going on in the industry and the different programs that are going on. Initially, there's a lot of stuff going on. As any of you know, you look at the articles every day, transport topics, carrier's edge. There's a million different avenues of getting information out there, and there's a ton of information. And I realized pretty quickly that if I tried to get all the updates in there that we saw, it would end up being a book. So we revamped our thought process and we figured we'd focus on just some major events that are occurring versus every little tidbit of information. So that's kind of what this is going to be, just kind of an overview of the larger picture throughout the year and what might be coming up in the future. Um, so just to give you a heads up, that's kind of where it was on the year-end update. Hopefully you'll grab some good information, little tidbits again that you could look at further on your own. There's going to be a bunch of links. Conrad's actually going to add some things on that will be sent out after the PowerPoint or after the presentation today that you can link on to get to the crash preventability program and the SMS system and the new prioritization preview that he had mentioned earlier. So with that being said, we can move on and take a look at this first slide here. So we're going to look at the economy. There's going to be 5 major items. It's going to be the economy, the parking situation that we currently have going on, lawsuits and law reform is going to be one of the issues that we talk about, insurance, which has become a large issue, and also driver pay. And you may ask, why did I choose those 5, as there's many other subject matters that we could cover. I chose them because I lean on this resource called ATRI, and it's the American Transportation Research Institute. It's a 501c3 organization. It's a not-for-profit research organization, and they do a great job of bringing things to light that the average person might not see. If you go onto their website, you can go in and get a bunch of reports. They report on all kinds of different things that are going on in the trucking industry that you may find an interest in. And when I pulled it up, their most recent report was the critical issues in the trucking industry for 2024. So if you look to the right of that, you'll see those are the top 5 items that they've brought to light for 24 moving into 25. The numbers on the in green under 2024, that is the current listing. So the economy comes in as number 1. Number 2 is truck parking. Number 3 is lawsuit abuse and reform. Number 4 is insurance cost and availability. And number 5 is driver compensation. Now, if you look to the number to the right in red, those were the standings in 2023. So the first 2 haven't changed. The economy was number 1, which has probably been the same for years. Truck parking been number 2, but as the freight has increased, more trucks are on the road, and the economy gets better, more trucks will need more parking spaces. So that's remained at number 2. What is actually moved up was the lawsuit abuse reform. That was at number 6 in 2023 and has quickly moved up to number 3. Insurance cost and availability, ironically, was not even in the 23 under the top 5. I forgot exactly where it stood, if it stood at all, but for all it's worth, under this top 5, it is non-applicable. So that's why the NA is next to that. But now it is at number 4. And ironically, driver compensation, that's kind of stuck in there at number 5. Fuel prices actually were number 3 in 2023, which is no surprise. Fuel prices were quite high last year. And actually, the driver shortage was number 4. So that seems to have moved away from that now. The driver shortage doesn't seem to be as big of a concern with owners as it had previously. So that's kind of the way the numbers are laying out there. The left-hand side is the current, and the right-hand side was last year's number. So let's look at the economy first. So now this is off their study, and all the respondents, the economy was again number 1 on the list, and that's why it's at the top. Their operational cost of trucking, they documented the industry cost increases of basically 22% over the past 2 years. Anybody who's on this call that owns a company or runs a company is probably well aware of the increase in their cost to do business. Not the least of which, insurance, I'm sure, is a big part to play in that. And that's been the highest recorded cost in the research's 16-year history. Now, not to get political, but the 2017 federal income and corporate tax cuts that were set to expire in 25, because of the new political situation, they may be continued on. That's kind of what people are hoping for. They were waiting to see how the election worked out, and the way it's worked out, that they may be continued in place, and that would be good for corporate tax cuts throughout the country and for companies themselves. About 51% of the respondents to the research report believe the best strategy for mitigating the negative impacts of the economy is to lessen the industry's regulatory burden. And so, in other words, take some of the rules and regulations away. You're going to see at the very end, under odds and ends, I found a thing about CARB, California Air Resources Board, very strict emissions control requirements over there. Usually they begin in California and they move across the country. There was a big thing the last few months of the year about getting diesel trucks, putting a large crimp on the purchase of these vehicles, in addition to motorhomes. And I can talk about that because I own a motorhome and it's got a 600 horse Cummins diesel in it. That was part of that problem also. That is since California's backed off of that. So take a little bit of the pressure off those people in California or going into California if you do that. Also advocating for nearshoring and nearshoring of equipment and parts manufacturing to reduce reliance on international supply chains, increase the reliance on the part of the manufacturers on sourcing materials within and closer to the US, which also reduces or eliminates maritime transportation costs. So currently in the news, they're talking about the tariffs. The president wants to bring manufacturing back to the country. So that kind of falls in within that reshoring and nearshoring of our equipment parts manufacturing. So we'll see how all that works out. But the less we have to rely on outside shipping and bringing stuff in from other countries, we may become more efficient. But again, only time can tell. We'll have to see how that goes. But that's some of the things that they identified in the economy portion of their research paper. So secondarily, let's move on to truck parking. So if we look over to the left, I found this little graphic here, and it gives you the scarcity of truck parking within the United States. As you can see, the darker states, we got Washington up here, California, looks like Colorado, I think that is. And then up in the Northeast, which anybody who runs up in the Northeast, we don't have to tell you that you have difficulties finding truck parking. What I did find surprising, though, was that Maine is actually having difficulty. And I've never been to Maine, but I thought there was quite a bit of open land in Maine. But obviously, according to this, there isn't that much space to put truck parking. Again, you got Nevada, you got Idaho, North Dakota, Wyoming. Obviously, those large open areas, a lot of areas for truckers to park their trucks. So the trucking industry in general continues to lobby Congress to pass the bipartisan Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. So that would help. And there has been some progress on truck parking. I've been watching articles come through, but it's a difficult situation to be in. One thing you can do if you're part of the, for example, PMTA under Pennsylvania or the Ohio Trucking Association out of Ohio, would be, join those organizations and make your voice heard. Let them know that you need or we need parking to allow our drivers to get the rest that they need. Some of the challenges are purchasing the right of way to put additional areas in. Facility maintenance costs, even when you're in your car going on vacation. Excuse me. I'm sure you've been waiting for that rest area that's up in the future. And next thing you know, here you come, and there's a closed rest area on the entrance because they're doing construction or revamping it. So lighting abatement regulations, trying to minimize the lighting. Maybe some neighborhoods don't like the large lit up parking spots. Limitations on the number of trucks that can park in an area, or complete bans on truck parking in general. There's been a number of articles over the last year where specific cities throughout the country have banned truck parking, even for an owner operator to bring his truck home, or a company driver, just the tractor to be able to park the truck over the weekend or something, and that's becoming more and more prohibitive. So, and then states applying for federal truck parking resources from programs such as the National Highway Performance Program, Highway Safety Improvement Program, and the National Highway Freight Program. So those are a couple different programs that states can go to apply for some of this money to be able to get their parking lots made. And this all started back in 2009. If any of you are familiar with what's called Jason's Law, a driver, I forget his Jason Reffenberger, possibly, or Reffenberg, not quite sure, was killed. He showed up at a delivery site early. They wouldn't allow him to park on site. He went and found a nearby gas station, abandoned gas station. I think it was in South Carolina, and ended up getting robbed and killed in the process. So his wife lobbied Congress, and it was finally enacted in 2012. So it's called Jason's Law, and that's kind of what is the push behind this also. And in addition, the use of ELDs, many of you are probably aware, now that everyone's on the clock, you can't change the clock. You can't move it around. You can't erase and extend lines. So it's put the pressure on the driver to be able to be parked before that ELD, before your 11-hour drive time has expired. There is the ability to use the PC, and we as AIM are beginning to tighten up and reinforce our PC program. We don't have a policy in place, but we are going to be thinking in the future about putting in a particular policy that would allow some movement for the driver under PC. They can use it, but the criteria is kind of restrictive. The general overview is that you can't use it to further commerce. If you go to 395.8 under the interpretations, question 26 really clearly defines it, specifically addresses the do's and don'ts of PC. Ironically, Canada allows 75 kilometers, or in miles, that's about 47 miles of unloaded movement with the trailer unhooked, the way we used to be. Can't remember what year they changed it for us, but now we can drive with a laden trailer to get to some safe haven or some place that we could park. So they did change that. We used to have a similar law to Canada. In Massachusetts, by the way, has the lowest rate of parking. So anybody who travels in Massachusetts, I feel for you. Relative to truck miles, they have 35 and a half spots per 100,000 mile truck miles traveled. So Massachusetts, and then again, it is a pretty small state, so I can understand. And if you look over here on that graph, you can see where those three states, and what is that? Vermont, Rhode Island, I think, probably Massachusetts, are all pretty small. So just to touch base on the truck parking situation. Now moving on to the new addition, that lawsuit abuse reform. I wasn't, being that I don't own a company, but I do pay car insurance, and my car insurance has really never gone down. It's only went up, probably similar to everyone here. I've begun to pay a little bit more attention to it, but I found some interesting information in this report. And one is that it's documented the impact of growing legal verdicts and settlements against the industry itself, and the resulting impact on commercial auto insurance premiums. State level reform is placing limits on the amounts that can be awarded to plaintiffs for non-economic damages, which is a big one. That's the preferred strategy of the majority of people. Almost 65% of the respondents to the study have requested or are hoping for this type of state level reform. And this kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about becoming a member of one of your trucking association firms, the PMTA or Ohio Trucking Association, so you can get your voice heard and try to get some movement on getting these things, some state reform on some of this. Now, what's really interesting, and probably some of the owners here are aware of this, I was never aware of this, but there's actually item number 3, quantify the impact of third-party litigation funding, or TPLF, on trial outcomes. So basically, you get hit by a truck, you don't necessarily have the money to file a lawsuit per se. The law firm might do the old, if it isn't worth it for me to do it, I'm not going to take it. There's now hedge funds, pension funds, there's different organizations with deep pockets that are coming in and saying, we'll front you the money to go ahead and sue this company. A lot of them, if there's no settlement, they don't get anything, but it gives people an incentive now to go ahead and file that lawsuit that may not have previously been filed. It's a $15.2 billion industry within the United States, and it began in Australia, ironically. So that's kind of new. I was never really aware of that and didn't realize it. So that's really a tough thing to push back against, is somebody's willing to fund your lawsuit against a trucking company if you were to be injured. So I'd be much more apt, as a devil's advocate, I'd be much more apt to file the lawsuit if someone was helping me pay for that lawsuit. And the law firms themselves really have, not necessarily, they might not have that much skin in the game, but now they get a bit more incentive to go ahead and file that suit. Nuclear verdicts, which I'm sure everyone has heard of, they're generally greater than $10 million at this point. Although in 2021, there had actually been a $1 billion, that's with a B, in case somebody misunderstood what I said, $1 billion lawsuit against 2 smaller companies. One of it was 900 million, the other was 100 million. 2 of the trucks got in an accident. There were no deaths associated with that, ironically, but somehow they got it up into that $1 billion settlement. Not sure if they got it or not. But a lot of these juries today, the defense attorneys will really lean on the juries to make the trucking companies look as bad as they possibly could. So the juries want to kind of make a statement by giving out these big settlements that we won't stand for trucking companies that are irresponsible, for lack of a better word. So let's see if I can find any additional notes in this. So, okay. So as a follow-up to that, actually, what I mentioned, what I'd like to talk about is ensure that you're doing your due diligence when you're hiring your drivers. Make sure you review 391 for what you need to do, 391.25, the annual inquiry. Make sure you're doing that. Road tests technically are not mandatory. It'd be a really good practice to get a road test in there. I will tell you a short story. We were just recently deposed. I spoke to my safety director a couple of weeks ago. He was actually deposed, and they spent a substantial amount of time on our road test when they were the defendant's attorneys were going through, or the plaintiff's attorneys were going through and really running our safety director through the grill on the road testing. So if I can recommend anything, is to make sure that all your back information is in line, all your, anything that could be possibly pulled up in a court of law, make sure that you begin to tighten that up, because they will definitely go after that. Phantom damages, medical costs that a defendant is billed for versus the actual medical costs incurred and paid. So they often result in non-compensatory windfalls for the plaintiff and the plaintiff's attorney. So again, just things, hopefully your insurance company is keeping an eye on what's being billed, but these phantom damages, along with that TPLF up there, the third-party litigation, kind of things that are just adding to the cost of lawsuit abuse or against the trucking company. So these are kind of some of the things on the reform that we're trying to hope will come out. All right, so insurance costs and availability. So what you want to do as a company, develop a framework for potential upfront insurance premium reductions when drivers and carriers adopt proven safety technologies. If you're not, well, ELDs are pretty well mandated. I mean, local people don't necessarily have to. You have a malfunction, you got 8 days to get it fixed. But in general, ELDs are becoming more and more prominent. We are currently, as AIM, we use Netronine. I'm not selling it. Don't get any sales commission on it, but we are using Netronine, and that has helped us tremendously to go back and look at proactively at things and get ahead of the curve on different driver habits, shall we say. We do not have inward facing, we just go outward facing, but that has been a tremendous help for us. We have used that to leverage our insurance costs a little bit. But anything that you can do, and there's some companies out there that really run the gamut. They put a lot of good safety technology on their trucks. So if you're not doing that, that may be something that you may want to look into. Again, this is out of the research paper. So educating the public on the role of lawsuit abuse and increasing consumer prices and insurance costs. A campaign to connect those dots for consumers is the preferred strategy. Basically, what 1 in 3% of the respondents kind of think that we need to educate the public on that. Not that they aren't anyway, because they're all paying car insurance and they're probably seeing those increases on their own vehicles. Now, in the last paragraph, fleets are increasingly deploying advanced driver assistance systems and improved driver training to reduce their crash risk. Also, keep in mind the documentation of the training that you need to do too. You can't just say that we trained our guys. You want to make sure that you have everything documented, so that if it were to go to a court of law or go to a jury, you could prove that you've actually been making a valid effort to try to improve your safety on the road. And also contact your insurance companies and be in touch with them, just like you do with your car insurance. I mean, look around, get in touch with them, see how you can work with them better to get that accomplished, to get a lower rate in your policy if you could. Driver compensation. That is a big one. I can feel for this one, being that I was a driver. So basically, about 43% of the respondents believe that quantifying the economic impact of compensating truck drivers for all hours worked is the preferred approach to driver compensation. So things are slowly beginning to move around. There's been things I've heard in politics. They've been talking about mandated per hour pay. I'm not sure if that's really ever going to go anywhere. I'd like to think that everyone on this call, if you're running a company, is paying your drivers their proper pay rate. Don't know if you are or not, but I would hope so. Some of the things that drivers are looking for is work-life balance. It's becoming more and more popular throughout the workforce in general, not just truck drivers. But guys, the generations today coming up, they don't want to be on the road for 3 weeks out of the month. Some guys do, and if they do, there's spots for those. But the majority of today's drivers seems to want to be home and have some work-life balance. They want reliable equipment, and they're looking for benefits of some type also. So something to keep in mind. Let's see, detention in 2023 equaled about 135.9 million hours. That's a lot of hours that go into detention. I know some of these facilities you may deliver to, the reefer industries is notorious for some of those customers using reefer trucks as storage facilities. Show up on a Monday and you don't get unloaded till Wednesday, but they don't worry about it because your stuff is staying nice and cold in your reefer that you're paying fuel for. So tough call. I don't know. I never ran a reefer, but I don't think I'd want to. But I give you guys credit if you're running reefer stuff. It's a tough job. Again, I mentioned drivers routinely list compensation as one of their top metrics, and I mentioned the others: work-life balance, reliable equipment, and just research and prioritize the effectiveness of programs that can incentivize drivers for retention. I know we do offer some different programs for safe driving, clean inspections, things of that nature. So anything you could do to help the driver be a little happier is probably in your best interest. So that covers the 5 items from the ATRI report. I'm going to move into the prioritization preview program. don't try to say that really fast. It's really difficult to say it fast. So that's why I kind of did it really slow. I did do a webinar on this back in November of 2023. And if anybody would like a copy of that was not on this call, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to forward that over to you. So basically, it's the program that's going to come into play, and I got the next couple slides. There's going to be something interesting in terms of a webinar that I was on a few weeks ago. But for all intents and purposes, they're looking at fairness, and they want to get greater consistency in the results by holding similar carriers to the same standard. Some people feel that they may not have been that way in the very beginning, especially I know flatbed versus freight or versus van. They were very upset because the flatbed guys were falling into the same categories that vans were. So they did change things around as time has went on, but they're looking for more fairness, accuracy, improving the quality of the data. They actually found that using this prioritization preview program, they found that there was a 10% higher crash rate in the carriers that they found under this new program. So in that respect, it seems to work a little better. And then they're looking for more clarity. So they're hoping that helping to make motor carriers better understand the results and to use them to adapt safer behaviors. So that's kind of the three things they were focused on when they first began this program. Big question is, where are they in the process? So they have three phases. I've been watching this pretty closely from the very beginning. That phase one, they had a comment period. Oh, let me go back to that. Phase one, they launched it. They collected comments from the motor carriers. The comment period ended back in May of 24. It was completed in 23 though, and they began to implement the changes. We're now in phase two, and actually they had offered a January 16th webinar, which I attended. I didn't get much new information, and a number of the questions on that webinar were, when was this going to be implemented? They don't have a date. So if any of you have put in any questions like, when is this going to start? I don't know, because they don't know. They didn't give us an answer to that. There were three webinars scheduled. It was January 16th, February 25th, which was upcoming. That was recently canceled. Literally last week, I got an email. They canceled it. And there was one, I think, scheduled in March, and I couldn't find any information on it. So I don't know where we stand other than what is given right up here in terms of reviewing the public comments, updating the CSA website, and finalizing the new methodology, but they're not giving us much more than that. They do run a preview on your SMS with your company. If you're using the system and you're going in, you can get a look as to what you would look like under this current program, but it is currently not implemented. And again, I don't know the date. So that's kind of where we stand with the prioritization preview at this point. So the things that they did do, though, that we could talk about is they have reorganized the basics from safety categories. Now they're calling them compliance categories. They did give a reason for it, but I can't quite remember the reason off the top of my head. There's going to be nine focus points, and that is in my other PowerPoint that I put together. I did not add it into this one. I just kind of grabbed the ones that are off the current prioritization preview website, which, by the way, you're going to have links to you're going to have information to get to those at the end of this. They have some really good stuff. I've gotten pretty much all my stuff off of that. I'm not going to say that I came up with this off the cuff. They have a lot of information. It's just a matter of the person themselves, you, the company, or management going in and learning about it. But one of the things they're going to do is change unsafe driving compliance category. They're going to incorporate the alcohol and controlled substance into that, so that will no longer be there. And the reasoning is they felt that the alcohol and drug impairment was basically the driver deciding that he was going to drive after he's done drugs or drank alcohol. So that would be better suited for unsafe driving. You've made that decision as a driver. Also, they put the out of service under that also, And again, because they felt that the driver himself made the decision to scrape the out of service orange sticker off his window and go ahead and continue to drive. So that was kind of their reasoning for moving those two items into the unsafe driving compliance category. They've also changed vehicle maintenance a little bit. So they've reorganized vehicle maintenance into two categories. They've called it vehicle maintenance, and that's the driver observed category. So they're thinking that this is going to be violations that could be reasonably observed by a driver during basically a level 2 walk around. So they weren't expecting the driver to get on their back, climb under the truck, and check the brake stroke necessarily, or check to make sure lines aren't rubbing and chafing up above the axles of the trailer or the tractor. It's basically just driver observed. That would probably be at the discretion of the officer at that point to determine which one he chose to write it under. The second one is going to be the vehicle maintenance, which is what we're all familiar with. That's what it began as. But that was items that are more identified by mechanics during a routine maintenance or a level 1 inspection. So obviously, if an officer comes out with a creeper, he's going to do a level 1. He's underneath. He's got to reach up to reach above the axles to find a rubbing hose. That should not go down as under the driver observed category. It should go under just the vehicle maintenance category. So, and this also, the reasoning for that was they went back into this exploratory factor analysis and found that it would just be better off separating those items, as you can see over in this area here, into two separate sections. Third one, new segmentation. So the segmentation before didn't break it out the way it is over here necessarily. Now they've broken the driver fitness into straight unit trucks and combination trucks. So that was a new thing there. And they've also broken hazmat. And this was the hazmat carriers were a little upset because the cargo tanks were bulked in with the non-cargo tanks. So it was just hazmat in general. They've now broken it out. They broke it into cargo tank and the non-cargo tank. So part of their reasoning on this was that it's based on a percentage of vehicles. So the straight carriers, if it's greater than 30% of power units, is kind of where they made that decision. Combination, if it's greater than 70%. So the focus when they get to these inspections would be really what the carrier's operation is in hauling the hazmat. Are you doing a cargo tank, or do you have a skid that's wrapped in a van type of trailer? And also, if you look into the foundational document, again, it's going to fall back to future slides coming up. You're going to see the breakdown, and one of them is the foundational document. Really good document to read. It's not a hard read, and that's one of the 4 items that I think will really help people to understand a little better. Another reorganized categories. They want to consolidate some violations. So what they've done is taken roughly 2,000 roadside violations, and now they've grouped them into basically 100 violation groups. It's not going to reduce the importance for the prioritization purposes. What they're looking at here was whether it really is the safety issue identified to begin with versus how many ways it was documented. And I can give you, quite a while ago, and it's probably occurred recently too. One of our drivers, or his pigtail was loose. On the DOT report, the officer identified every single light on that trailer. All the lower lights, the brake lights, the turn signals, the running lights, the marker lights up at top. That was a 2-page inspection report identifying each individual light that could be associated with that, with the associated points that were allotted to that particular violation. Although even at that point, even if they'd written up all 5 of the marker lights at the top under, I forgot what violation that is, you'd only get dinged for the 1. But boy, to look at the actual piece of paper in the DOT report, it looked really bad. So they're not so concerned anymore about how many times or how many ways it was documented, more or less, did you identify the violation itself? So these individual violations, though, will continue to be visible on the inspection history tab of the SMS website. Again, so FMCSA has determined that whether a safety issue is identified is more important than how many ways. So in other words, maybe to help you out a little bit, and this example is in that information that, the foundational document. Let's say you get popped for driving beyond the 14, drive beyond the 11, or you have a beyond the 8 hours since your last duty status change, or driving more than 70 hours in 8 days. So 2 or more of these violations would fall under the hours of service requirements group. And now this is where they've changed the severity weighting, and it's going to be the next slide, actually, where I'm going to talk about this. If you were placed out of service for any one of those violations, you're going to have a severity weighting of 2. If there were no out of services on that, it's going to be a 1. There will be no longer a 1 to 10 rating system. For example, 5s on brakes, 8s on tires, a 10 for cell phone use texting. Those numbers won't be there. They're going to fall under a 1 or a 2. And that's going to be, talk about that right here, simplified violation severity weights. So moving from a 1 to 10 scale of severity weighting to a simplified 1 to 2 scale of severity weighting. Again, their reasoning was putting weight to all individual violations was not as important as noting the violation had occurred. And the frequency to them equals more of an indicator of safety compliance. I don't necessarily agree or disagree, but the one thing that was brought up in that webinar that a number of people asked about was the fact that basically you could be driving in terms of speeding. The old speeding system, 6 to 10 over was 4 points, 11 to 14 was 7, 15 and over was 10 points. Now, you could be doing 4 over, or you could be doing 15 over. If you're not placed out of service for something, it's still going to fall into just a number 1 scale. So people had some issues with that. They felt that that should have been designated a little differently. As it stands right now, it's going to fall, if you're not placed out of service for something, it's going to fall as a number 1. So you're not going to know necessarily whether the guy did 15 or 4, although that inspection report will still be in the system. But to try to take a quick glance, you're just going to see a 1 from the way they're talking. Let's see. So that kind of clarifies it a little bit up there. I should have probably clicked a little sooner on that, but the out of service applies to all compliance categories except unsafe driving, and then driver disqualifying violations, 383.51. So that covers all 4. Number 1 is the majors, felonies, fatalities, things of that nature. Table number 2 is speeding, 15 and over is considered serious. Cell phone use, texting. Table 3 is railroad crossings and things of that nature. And table 4 was violating out of service, and there's only 2 of those. So 383.51, if you want to look at those, probably be helpful. All right, so they're currently using the safety event groups, and remember to click on this real quick. There you go. All right, that shows up over there. This is currently the way they're working this. So again, the combination 1 under the combination in straight trucks, you fall into number inspections with unsafe driving, and it's 3 to 8. There's different safety event groups for the different basics. I just grabbed this one off for the unsafe driving. This will be disappearing. They won't be doing this anymore. They're going to identify the exact number of inspections, and they're going to hope that it stabilizes their percentile changes instead of the grouping. So they've done all the studies. Supposedly, that's way beyond my pay grade on to how they determine these things, but the reasoning is that would allow for an improved picture of individual carriers versus grouping of carriers. So, in other words, I guess maybe let's go back here. got ahead of myself there. So in other words, if you only had 4 inspections and Conrad's company had 8, you'd still fall within the same look. And now they're taking them as individuals. So that driver, whoever only had 3, is generally doing a better job than Conrad. And I'm not putting it on you, but I happen to look at my screen and there's your face. So, putting Conrad, at a number 8, he would have been a worse company to run for that in that respect. They're going to change they improved the intervention thresholds. So you can look over here. I kind of made this pretty easy. None of these are going to change. They're all going to stay the same. We removed controlled substance and alcohol because remember that went to unsafe driving in this new organization. They did move the fitness criteria from 65 to 75 for passengers, 75 to 85 for hazmat, and 90. So those are the intervention thresholds. And then hazmat, all of those passenger hazmat in general have all moved up to 90. So that's kind of the improvements, or in their mind, that they've moved up to. Let's see, focus on recent violations. So they're only going to calculate percentiles in the categories of hours of service, vehicle maintenance, both vehicle maintenance, driver observed. So both those 2 categories, hazmat and driver fitness. It's going to be violations that were within a year. And the reasoning was improving the focus on carriers with more recent violations and a higher crash rate. So if you had anything past the year, you're not going to be prioritized for interventions after that point in time. So kind of a little twist on that. They want to focus on people that have more current violations than going after someone that's on the tail end of a 2-year history under the SMS system. And this is kind of the page I had been talking about earlier. So the resources from the FMCSA, what's changing. Conrad mentioned that he is going to add these.
Could you repeat that last part? We just had a quick request.
The page before?
Yeah, like right at the tail end.
The reasoning was because with under SMS, this stuff would stay on the system for 2 years. Crashes stayed for 3, and they would do the priority interventions based on a 2-year history. They found that they weren't getting the success that they wanted going out 2 years. So now they're looking at more current violations, and they want to look at people within the last year that have had violations, and that's who they're going to focus on. So the more current offenders, I guess, is another way to say it, versus some of the older offenders. So does that help? I hope that helps. I don't know if they're going to respond, but
yeah, and I'll send out John's slideshow along with a recording to this webinar, so everyone can go back and reference anything.
Okay. And actually, like I had mentioned earlier, and we were just on, we're going to go back to these 4 things right here. What's changing? Approved changes guide, foundational document, violation groups. This is really the Bible of this whole prioritization preview thing. You'll have a lot of the information that I grabbed was grabbed out of these. I tried to summarize it, condense some of it for everyone, but really it's easy to go into the websites, and it opens it up and you can really get the nuts and bolts of everything that's going to occur with this new system coming in. So I'd highly recommend, if you haven't visited this site and looked into it, take a look at it, bookmark it, favorite it, print it out, however you got to do it. But there's a tremendous amount of information, and it's as current as it's going to be at the moment. Not to say it's going to change in the future, but at the moment it's as current as it's going to be. So I'd highly recommend that. And again, you'll have this in the PowerPoints that Conrad's going to forward to everyone, so you should be good to go. But great stuff there. I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that that's where you could find it. So let's move into the Crash Preventability Determination Program, or I guess for short we'll call it the CPDP program. They expanded it on December 1st of 2024. So this is kind of what they're looking at. The eligible crash occurs if it's eligible. It moves on to, you got to submit a request with the, or a request with the police accident report. They won't do them without the accident reports in there. So you do have to get a police report. The FMCSA will review it, and then they will post their determination. So really the thing, and this impacts the data queue system also, and it is the request for data review, the RDR program. You want the police report, any supporting documents that you could have, photos or videos. I think it's 25 megs on the video is the max that they'll accept for that. If it's proven to be preventable, they will remove it from a calculation of the crash indicator basic in the SMS. Also, the non-preventables are going to be noted in the pre-employment screening programs for drivers. So that'll help them, because previously it would just say that you were involved in an accident and wouldn't give anything in terms of preventability. Now, they cannot accept any accidents older than 5 years old because the system itself only goes back 5 years. Keep in mind that after 5 years, it wouldn't be in the system anyway. So they did make it a point to tell us that the accidents older than 5 years won't apply, so you don't have to go back 5 years or longer. And again, older crashes aren't used for the safety calculations or displayed in these systems regardless. So, all right. So the request for review, and if you go on their website, you'll see it in red above that previous slide, that little whatever screen you want to call it, but it does say specifically in red, due to high volume of submissions, requests are taking approximately 90 days to process. And I can't remember which one of those websites took us in there. One of them will show a graph of how many requests have been made so far. And there have been a lot. A lot of companies are taking advantage of this. So if you're having issues with some crash preventability visibility in your companies, it may be worth it to go back and take a look and see if you can get some of those revised. The eligibility criteria, you want to initiate a data queue request or review. You want to provide a copy of the police accident report or PAR and any other documents to support their argument, meaning your argument. Any post-crash drug and alcohol tests will need to be placed in there also if there was a fatality involved. And any crash can be reviewed and determined to be not preventable, not just the ones that fall into specific categories. There are 21 categories that they've added. I'm sorry, that we're at now, 21. Forgot what it was previous. I don't know. They said they added 4. I don't know if it was 17 plus 4, but it does give you the old criteria. And remember, the old criteria is going to apply up until December 4th. After December 4th, this new criteria that has 21 different examples of preventability in there, that's what's going to apply. If video footage from a dash cam proves the crash was not preventable, FMCSA will also review it and make a preventability determination. So how do I, now I've sent it in and I'm wondering how can I find out where I stand on this whole thing? So if you go into the data queue system, it'll provide you with status information about where it stands and how far you've progressed. It's updated immediately as soon as it is moves from one stage to the other to review the next one. The statuses are as followed. So submitted, that you can see that you've submitted it. You could see that it's in review if you want. You could see that it's pending. They may be waiting for something from you that they need. Maybe they need a police report or something of that nature. It's closed. It's not eligible. They'll determine that, so you'd be able to tell that it is. Closed, no request or response. They've asked you for information, additional information. You failed to give it to them within 14 days, so they've closed that request. And closed, determination made, and that's where you'll find out whether it's going to be not preventable, preventable, or undecided. And that's going to be on this next page here. So again, this is where I mentioned few seconds ago, CSA reviews 21 specific crash types now. They actually have pictures in there of what being hit in the rear on the driver's side, behind the drives or at the drives, back in the trailer. Obviously, getting hit from the rear is going to be a preventable, but the criteria is all in there. It's very self-explanatory. We actually distribute that to our drivers to let them know how these crashes are determined. We also use the National Safety Council definition of a preventable accident. Also, when we have drivers involved in incidents and they sometimes disagree with our decision, and we send that to them, and it basically says that if you haven't done everything you could to avoid the accident, it's considered a preventable accident. So, again, the final determinations, the three choices are going to be not preventable, preventable, undecided. You can contact the CD. Oh, I printed that wrong down there. It should be CDPD instead of DP. You can email them there to ask them further questions if you'd like. I have not done it, so I don't know their response time on it, but I would imagine it's relatively good. And again, like I mentioned, December 1st, 2024 forward will be reviewed under the new criteria, which will be inclusive of these 21 specific crash types. Prior to December 1st, 2024, the old criteria will be used. And remember, you can only go back 5 years. So anything older than 5 is not going to be looked at. Also, another little tidbit in there that I have on my notes is decisions are based on information available at the time, could be changed after receiving additional information and after the request is closed, but they have written in there that it's not appropriate for use by private parties in civil litigation. Decisions do not establish legal liability or negligence by any party. Kind of sounds a little open-ended for me. Not appropriate doesn't mean can't be used. So maybe I need a little more clarification on that. And if I get on the webinar again with them, I may ask that question. Not appropriate seems to be a far cry from not being able to use. So I'm not sure what their reasoning or what they mean by that particular sentence in there. So some additional information. Any additional information, in my mind, always equals valuable knowledge. So these are some of the things that I mentioned that kind of just put in there to help you. CARB, that California Air Resources Board, pulls back the EPA request on large truck emissions. That's the website that'll take you there. Preventability changes, added more than 4 categories. Sorry, I should have put added there. Again, that's the website or the link that you can get in there. What can I learn about SMS? The link there that a lot of you are probably familiar with. Recent addition came through. Conrad and I were talking this morning. The DOT oral fluid specimen collection procedures have changed. If you run the company, management, safety team might want to take a look at that and be up to date on the most current things that are occurring there. Another brand new one. I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with the fentanyl issue we're having around the country. So the feds have now authorized testing for fentanyl. That was not previously in the system. That's literally that within the last month, I think that may have come through. Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, some additional information on that as of November 18th. I think on the next slide, you're going to see that first slide is going to talk about that a little bit. Some information there on disqualification of drivers and how the state's going to handle it. And then learn how to use the data queues, and there's the link taking you to that particular thing. So, and here's where we get into the odds and ends. Just little tidbits of information I thought I found, and I thought I'd throw it in there just to maybe pique your interest. And here's that return to duty for CDL drivers, what I just talked about. As of November 18th, the second clearinghouse final rule is in effect. So let's see, CDL holders, CLP holders may have a prohibitive status in the drug clearinghouse, and they will lose their state-issued privileges until the driver completes the return to duty status. So something to keep an eye on there. Emergency braking awaits the final rule, so they're waiting for that to come out. It looks like it should come out sometime in early 2025, which we're going to be here before we know it. So something to keep your eye out there in terms of emergency braking and what's going to be expected there. Speed limiters, big hot topic there. I've seen this, man, the last couple of years. This keeps coming back. Uh, I am not sure what's going to look like to have 4 or 5 miles of trucks that can all go only 65 miles an hour stuck in the right lane. It's not going to be a pretty sight. But the agency plans to publish the proposed rulemaking around May 2025. So if you have anything to say about that, again, get your voice out there. Take a look in the Federal Register and find that. Hopefully they're still taking comments. I'm not sure. Well, it was 8 years ago it was published, so comments are probably kind of moot at this point. And in 22, it announced that it intends to proceed. So not sure where it's going to go, but keep your eye open for that one. That should be interesting. An ELD revision proposal expected in 25. So looking at the applicability to pre-2000 engines. I know back when this came out, a lot of guys were talking about going to glider kits, getting away from having to use ELDs. That's probably what's prompting this bullet point number 1. Addressing malfunction. Didn't give us much more information on how they're going to do it or what they're going to do, but just these are kind of things they're going to look for. ELDs certifications. As a company, you might want to make sure that you're using certified legit ELD product. We use Platform Science. Again, I'm not selling it, just saying we use Platform Science. But probably every month, come out with 2 or 3 ELDs that are uncertified from the feds and you can no longer use them. So I feel bad for those companies who have to juggle through and try to grab something at the last minute to get to their drivers because they've been using something that they thought was cheaper or easier to use. And the last one really kind of calls this odds and ends into play because something that was going on back, man, it's got to be 8-10 years ago. They had a big run of inspections going on I-90/80 running through Ohio. We were familiar with it. We were getting a couple citations for not having a certification on an ICC bumper. We did a bunch of looking around, couldn't figure out what they were talking about. Turns out it was a test program. They were trying to see how many trucks didn't have the certifications. A lot of back and forth on this because, in essence, imagine your truck is a 20-year-old trailer. That certification label, if there was ever one on there, is gone. It rusted away. You can't get any shop to re-weld it because they won't certify that it falls under the vehicle requirements for that. So it was really a quandary as to what to do. But they've recently, and I think you'll find it under CVSA, the out of service criteria, this little blurb here that does an ineligible or incomplete or missing rear impact guard certification label under that regulation 39386 did not meet the NHTSA strength and energy absorption requirements. And so no. So they may tell you that you need one. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go look and see if you could get one, or if you have them, maybe reinstall them or place them in where they'll stay longer. But at the moment, it doesn't look like you're going to be written up or cited for that particular violation. So just thought I'd throw in there as an aside. And with that being said, I think we've gotten to the end of it. I went a little bit longer, about 3 minutes over. So just keeping an eye out into the future with binoculars because you never can tell where these things come at us from the industry in terms of new laws and regulations and different things like that. So this guy is diligently looking out into the distance, watching out for all of us. And if we get any new things coming down the road, probably put together maybe another update for the end of the year, and we'll keep you posted. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, for attending. I appreciate it. All those links are going to be forwarded to you by Conrad that you can use. My email was on the front. So if you'd like to reach out, feel free. I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have or forward any additional information that I may have that you could use. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, John. And yeah, as John mentioned, I know we're kind of running over on time here, but just wanted to take a couple minutes. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now or hop off, whatever is most convenient for you. But just want to make sure that we get a chance. So looks like Chris Mills has a question. So let me see if I can um, allow your mic here. So Chris, looks like you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask your question, or you can type it in the chat, whatever you
Yeah, there we
prefer.
go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, beautiful. So one of the things I had, I mean, this is going to go way back closer to the beginning of the presentation, but have you guys received any pushback from drivers about having a inward facing camera? And if you have, what have you guys done to kind of, because my guys are just worried that I'm going to be spying on them. I told them I've got way better things to do than be watching you all day.
Right.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate the question. We are not running inward cameras. They're just going outward. But I will say that, it's funny, the interesting thing that we found with the outward cameras is, and you may be experiencing the same thing, prior to the implementation of the cameras, we would have, quote, accidents, crashes, things occur. The driver would say, this guy hit me, or whatever or, I didn't hit this. Well, it's ironic all the things you can see when you go back and review the videos. Merging is a relatively large issue for us. Just the driver not giving way to a car. And I get it, it's frustrating. You're on the GWB going into New York, it's a horrendous situation. But you're not going to win if you hit the car. You know, um, it's just a frustrating situation, and it's even more frustrating because the drivers think that they're in the right, but under the national council thing, all they had to do was stop and let the guy in. And I get it. You've already let 3 cars in. This is number 4, and he's squeezing himself in. But for you to hit him or to make contact doesn't end up well for either. So the short answer to your question is we don't run inward. We have not really gotten any input on that because we don't do it. We did get some negative impact initially when we put the cameras in, but that's basically settled down. And surprisingly, a number of drivers actually like the cameras on the outward side. So,
Yeah, and
oh, I
I imagine
appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, I
yep.
imagine I mean something I've heard before is that, like in as far as like legal cases go, it would help protect the driver too. Like if someone said they were distracted or something, like that might help protect them.
There have been a number of incidents that we have had the officer look at the camera
Hmm.
and that it hasn't been a problem. That came in handy there.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions for John before we wrap up here? Give it just a couple seconds, see if a hand goes up or a question hits the chat. No? All right. Well, if something does come up, I'll include John's email in that follow-up email, and I'll probably have that out either tomorrow or Monday. And as was alluded to before, that email will contain a recording, a link to a recording of today's session, along with John's presentation, and then some of those resources that he linked to. So really valuable stuff there. And then, of course, if you want to look into any of AIM's services, you can visit our website. It's aimntls.com, or you can throw AIM Transportation Solutions into your Google machine, and it'll come right up. Or you can also email me directly, and I would be more than happy to help. And that's it for today. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you, John, for another great webinar.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.